can probably still keep going. You can probably still keep going. It's 10 minutes till. Turn it down a little.
Pam, just to let you know, your microphone is unmuted.
Wait.
Can you turn that down just a little bit?
So, Cindy, how are your bees doing this year?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
They're doing pretty good. I checked on them last week, had a couple that needed some feed, bunch that were all tight in their little cluster with a box full of honey right above them. And then I think 2 that might have a mouse. But I got to wait for a warmer day to get in there.
That's not good. I haven't been able to check on mine at all since I was going to treat with oxalic acid around the holiday, and I caught this bug, and so I haven't been able to do oxalic acid treatments or check up on them or anything. So I'm just hoping and praying.
Yeah. Sometimes it just has to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So Cindy, did you see the tight little cluster by seeing them, or did you use a floor?
I actually, I lifted the box just an inch and looked in, and they were all right in there. And then I could see them down in from the box above. So it was one of those warm days a week or so ago where it got up in the 40s. I think it was 48 or 49.
Yeah, I guess I should have combed my hair before I got on here, huh?
Is that hive behind you for a demonstration?
It is. Yeah, I've got the kitchen table set up pretty good. Although the wife might not like it. So. Hey, how do I do the full screen on here when I do my presentation?
That's a
Do
good
you
question.
mean so you can see it?
No, I don't care necessarily for me, for everybody else to see it.
Oh, it's on everybody else's end. You can click view, and there's a presenter view, and it'll present you while you're talking.
And where's the view at?
It should be at the top.
Top right corner. Should be nine little squares next to the word view.
Okay. Yeah. Speaker
Yeah.
view.
If you do speaker view, you'll be able to see. All I see is Mark now.
Okay.
And then everybody else is.
Oh,
right
I see is Cynthia's name.
So, okay. And, it's probably on there, but Royden might want to put a address of where to mail the checks to for the membership dues.
Okay, it's on the form.
We'll get that on the Facebook page as a good reminder. Plus it was in the email.
Okay.
And the form does have the addresses.
You're always invited.
That's a good point.
I know how much you love being here from 7 to 8 at night.
Mark, by the way, every time you start talking, you're full screen on my machine.
Oh, okay.
I muted SmartVet. So if you guys want to talk, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, John. How's it going?
It's going. Like that snow we didn't get. I'm happy about that.
I think we got maybe a third of an inch out here in the Downs area.
Yeah, we just got a dusting in town. That was enough.
We're supposed to get a pretty good snow this weekend from what they say. Being the bringer of bad news,
Right.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I'm hoping it doesn't happen for me too.
I guess it's 7 o'clock somewhere.
Hey, John, I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
Okay.
And anybody that we muted or whatever, if you need to talk, just go ahead and unmute yourself. It's just sometimes easier for us to mute it than you to fumble around for it.
Also,
Okay,
anybody who's got their video going, shut your video off, because that way people who are in rural areas, that really sucks down the bandwidth. And so it's better for everybody but Mark, obviously, to shut the video off, and that way it helps people like PK and Tom K. I mean, well, Tom K too, but
Yep,
I think
me
he's
too.
got good internet.
I don't have video
Well-
on. I just have a background picture.
yeah. Well, okay. This is PK. I am now the past president. We do have a new board. Thank you who voted. Tom Krutz is the new president, so Tom K. The vice president is still Cindy Cannett. I am still the treasurer, PK, and Royden is still the secretary. We have some at-large members, which would be tonight's speaker, Mark. We also have James Shiverdecker, but with him comes his wife. And then I'm missing somebody. Oh, Izzy. Izzy's new to the board, so he's going to be there also. We have a couple consultants. Tom Panconen, Tom P, is our geek guy, helping with the Zooms and coordinating that. So he's a consultant that way. Cynthia Shiverdecker is the equipment coordinator, so that's who you talk with to check out equipment. And I would like to turn it over to Tom K now.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. And welcome to our first monthly CIBA meeting of 2021. I'd also like to mention, though John Eldridge has left our board, he's still sort of our legal consultant and a good guy to include on things. But and thank you for your time on the board previously, John. So just a couple of quick admin things before we get started with the Mark's presentation. We have a class coming up this Saturday, the 30th. Registration's still available, so if you hit our Facebook page, the registration, or you can get to the registration from there. There's also an alumni offer. So for all of our current members or previous attendees of the class that are current members, you can attend free of charge as a benefit of your membership. And that brings me to membership. I think Patty just sent out or PK sent out an email about membership. It's $15. Most of that goes to our dual membership, which is to the ISBA, the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. So they get most of that, but there are many other perks, such as use of our library, use of our equipment, reduced cost for some of the other training, or in this case, free access to the class if you're a previous attendee. And if you have any questions about that, you can contact Royden, who's our membership coordinator. And if you have not gotten the email from PK, let us know in the chat session, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of that with the information and where to send the $15. Any questions? Okay, with that, then we'll turn things over to Mark Delschmidt for his presentation on winter inspections and winter feeding. Take it away, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Well, for all of you that are new, I'm happy that you're here. And I guess I should say for all of you that aren't new, I'm also happy that you're here. It's nice to have a nice group of people together. I'm going to talk about what I do with my hives, in order to hopefully get them through the winter. Gosh, when you are talking about your hives and the winter and trying to get them through the winter, things start so much earlier as far as getting them doing the preparation for it before it gets cold. My experience has been that working with bees, that there's a calendar, a kind of an unwritten calendar, or in some cases a written calendar of things that you need to do, and you need to stay on top of it. It's easier said than done. For example, if you do not treat for mites, that is fine. But if you do not treat for mites, you probably won't have any bees come spring. That's just kind of the way that it is at this point in time. With it, the treating for mites, September, October, I treat for mites a couple times before the first snowfall. With it, my experience has been the hives that I do not treat early, they don't make it through the winter. With it, some people may have better luck than me, but that's been my personal experience. As far as winter hive inspections, when I go out to my bee yard, you kind of walk out to the bee yard. If there's snow on top of the hive, I take the top off and I remove the snow. I guess I should start by saying, when do you go out and do your hive inspections? Well, you want it to be warm. Come January, come February, when are those warm days? With it, if you can see on the calendar that it's supposed to get like 50 degrees and not be raining, that's a day that I would target going out there to inspect the hive. If it's supposed to be 20 degrees out, and that would be a day that I would probably rather not go out and do my hive inspection. Ideally, you want to inspect the hives when the bees are flying, when it's around 50 or so. But come January or February, you may not have any days like that. It's kind of hit and miss. And it may say that next Thursday it's supposed to be 43 degrees. Well, weather forecasts can change between now and next Thursday. Those are things that I look at. With the inspection, I go out there and I always say never say never. I'd like for it to be 40 degrees. I'd like for it to be 50 degrees. But if we went 2 months and there are no 40 or 50 degree days, then, well, I'm going to get in there and try to inspect my hive, get in, get out, and do what I need to do and do it as quick as possible. And for me, that means I have everything there right at my hive, at my feet. I can reach down and get it and do it. And I'm not in there very long. With it, when I go out there, if there's snow on top of my lid, I'll go there and I'll brush the snow off. With it, when I brush the snow off, I then look at my bottom board and see if my reducer is in place or if it's not in place. I will take some sort of brush or something and brush off the snow on the bottom board if there's snow on the bottom board. My hives, I have all of them tipped towards the opening of the hive. The reason that I do that is if there's moisture that gets in the hive, I want it to be able to go to the bottom and drain out the front and not be stuck in my hive. I will take my reducer off and my mouse guard off, and I will look to see if there's bees. I can see bees in the bottom that are dead. If there are, I usually will take something. A lot of times it's just a stick or a branch, a small one. I'll reach in there and kind of pull them towards the front and pull them out of there. Sometimes when you do that, you think all these bees are dead, and all of a sudden you see a bee that's is moving around when you've done it. Well, that tells me that the bees have clustered towards the bottom, and I need to stop doing it. So I do. I put the mouse guards back on. I put the reducers back on, and then continue. As you're looking at your hives, sometimes you might notice that the reducer has been moved, or it's out of place. There's a bigger gap than what you want, or that when that happens, I usually assume that a mouse has got in there and has opened that up, which is bad news for me. Sometimes a raccoon or something can do that. I will take my reducer, and what I do is I just put a nail right in the middle of it, and I nail it down to the bottom board. Once it's on there, it's on there. With it. When it comes to spring, I just pull the nail out and there you go. I'm all set. The problem with your mouse guard or your entrance reducer being moved or the gap being bigger is mice can get in there. Once you get mice in there, what they will do they'll go to the bees, and they'll slowly as the bees gets colder, they are slower moving. So they'll grab a bee and they'll eat it. Well, you come to a hive where all the dead bees, they've got maybe the head and a piece of the tail left, and it looks like something's ate the middle. Well, unfortunately, I know what it is. I got a couple of those hives right now. With it, I try to do this when it's warm. It's easier said than done. Sometimes in the wintertime, ideally the bees are flying. That's the best time to do it because it's warm. The bees will, as it gets cold, they will cluster. They will make a ball of bees in order to stay warm. When they do this, they will produce moisture. Condensation will go up to the top of your hive, and the condensation will drip back down. And if that moisture lands on the bees, it's going to kill the bees. Cold bees die with it. It is my belief that the winter doesn't kill the bees. The cold in the winter doesn't kill the bees. The moisture is what kills the bees. With it, there are things that I do in order to try to eliminate that moisture or make it as little of a problem as possible, and that would be tilting the hive towards the front. The back end is always a little bit higher. That way, if there is a lot of moisture that gets in there, it will, in theory, run out the front. The other thing is, and this would be an example of my hives. With it, I've got the top board or the lid And there's nothing special about the lid. Under the lid, I put some insulation, foam insulation. This happens to be 2-inch foam insulation because this is what I found. I found this at a very good price, so I got that. If it was 1-inch insulation, I would have bought that. Yeah, with it. I put the insulation in my lid. And when that will hopefully keep some of the warmth in the hive. But once the moisture gets on this, it's going to drop back down. It's going to go out. I always put some sort of box on top of my hives. I do what I call a sugar shim, and this is what the sugar shim looks like. It's nothing special. It's just a square, same size as your hive. With it, I put 3 holes in it, and the holes are about 1/2 inch. And on 2 of the holes, I will put window screen on it to prevent the mice from coming in. I want to do everything I can to prevent the mice from coming in. On 1 hole, I leave open where the bees can come and go if they need to. I then, after I have that on there, I put just an ordinary screen. I staple it. This is window screen. And the nice thing about the black window screen is you can see through it. Now that probably means nothing right now, but once you have that shim on there, and you have it stapled in there, I will put my sugar on the hive frames and put the shim on top of it. The way I put my sugar on is I just take a piece of newspaper, usually a 1/2 sheet of newspaper. I'll set it right on top of my frames, and then I will pour a sugar mixture in it. The sugar mixture I use is just plain sugar that you buy at the store, and then I add a pollen. And this is the pollen that I use. And the pollen you can buy like at Man Lake, and I will put the pollen and the sugar in a container and just mix it up. This is what mine looks like. How much do I use? I really don't measure it. I just kind of look at the color. A light yellowish color, that's good for me. And then I pour that on top of the frames with the newspaper. And once it's on top of the frames, with the newspaper, I put my shim on top of it. On top of my shim, I will put some sort of wood chips. Wood chips like you would use for like a hamster cage or bedding for a horse. And this is the wood shavings that I use, and I just kind of pour it inside of the box. This box becomes what I would call a quilt box, and it doesn't make any difference if it's considered a smaller box like a honey super or a bigger box. It doesn't really make any difference. I just fill it with wood chips. Once I do the wood chips, on top of it, that will absorb some moisture if there's moisture in there. Once I have that in there, with my box, I'll have that on top of my shim. And when I go to look to see if I need more food or more sugar, I will just simply take my hand, and when I take my hand, I will move the wood chips back. And when I move the wood chips back, I do a couple of things. One, I see if they, how wet they are. If they are, if there's a lot of moisture in it and they're wet, then I can just remove all of those real quick and then fill it up with more wood chips that's never been used with it. It's an easy process to do it that way. It's fast. The advantage of this flat window screen is that I can take my hand in the box and move the wood chips and look down and see if there's any sugar in it. Are the bees in there? Are the bees eating anything? Is the sugar almost gone, or is the sugar gone? With it, those are things that I'm looking for and looking at. If I think that they need sugar, then I will quickly open up lift up my shim and add sugar to it and put it back down. The screen also keeps the wood chips up here and not down below where the sugar is. That's what I do for feeding. How often do I do that? Gosh, probably about every 3 weeks. I will make a point of going out and doing that. I think a lot depends on the temperature and how much honey storage they have. As the temperature warms up, the bees are more active. The more active the bees are, the more they're going to eat. The other thing is, as it gets warmer, the bees will produce more eggs and more larvae, and there will be more brood in there. The more bees there are, the more that they will eat. It's been my experience that the most critical time to obviously the most critical time to feed the bees is when they're out of food, but they seem to run low on food, like March, sometimes in March, sometimes in April. And just because things are warming up doesn't mean that they have a new source of food. I believe that most people that lose their bees due to starvation, they lose them during the month of March or early April, when there's nothing for them to eat.
Hey, Mark, we got some questions.
Okay.
If you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. And I would also say that, in my opinion, there are no stupid questions. If anybody has questions, I'd encourage you to ask them. Let's see.
So here, I can read them to you. We'll make it a little easier for you. So yeah, as Mark said, he wanted to keep this pretty interactive. So if you guys got questions, just go ahead and fire them off in the chat window. If you're not a Zoom expert, we'll take a break here at the end of reading these, and we'll let you unmute and you can ask a question, or if we didn't hit the spot, we'll ask that as well. So the first question here from Tom, he says, how much, like 3 degrees tilt? He says just a shim under the back, winter only or all the time tilted forward. And I think that was in regards to your lid.
Well, in regards to my lid, I do I try to tilt my hive all the time. With it, just all year round. With it, the shim, I put my shim in pretty much just the winter time. With it, The problem with putting that in there in the summertime is that the bees will, they'll put wax in it and will kind of make a mess with it. In the wintertime, they don't seem to do that. They're not in the business of making wax at that point in time. So I hope that answers the question for you. My tilt on it is it's not real steep. It's just enough where if water gets on in the back of the hive, it's going to roll down to the front of the hive.
All right, so there's another question in here from Polly. It says, does the tilt matter if you have screen bottom boards?
No, it does. If you have a screen bottom board, it should not matter. The moisture should hit the bottom, go through the screen and out the bottom.
All right, so we have another question that says, just a tip in winter, I wouldn't think you would need to, with the screen bottom board, yep, that's kind of along the lines of what you just said. There's another question that says, I agree that in March and April months is the best time to watch for feed. And that's because of the fact that they're building up, right? So it's the fact that that queen started laying, typically sometime in February, she'll start laying and the numbers start increasing inside of that hive, right, Mark?
That would be correct. But the other thing with that is, for a example, I've got 14 hives lined up. I went out to check my bees the other day to see how they were doing, what the sugar issues were and were not. The first 13 hives had plenty of sugar in it. I'm thinking, why am I out here? The 14th hive had probably about a half of a fist or maybe a half of a cup of sugar. They ate all that. With it, I opened it up. Anytime I'm opening something, with it, I'm going to put enough sugar in there to hopefully to last for another month or two. With it, so yeah, that's what I do.
So there's a question on here, I think PK was asking, is when do the queens usually start laying?
Well, I think the queens start laying when the temperature gets up to about 50 degrees, 55 degrees. My belief is that's when, and if they have food, I believe that's when the queens really start laying. If you have consistent temperatures that are in the 50s, it might be warm enough for them to lay, but not warm enough for there to be much food out there. With it, as they lay, they get more and more bees, and it's like, okay, maybe you had so many bees a month ago. Now they're laying, and you're getting a whole lot of bees that are coming to the hive, new mouths to feed.
Let's see here. We got another question that says, if your bottom board is screened, would it be better to close off the bottom to retain heat, or is the ventilation a higher priority?
Well, that's an interesting question. In my opinion, the cold weather is not going to kill your bees. With it, I would be more interested in the ventilation. Give you an example. Last year, all of my hives were a bottom board, solid bottom board. I bought a hive from somebody who had one out in the field, and that hive had a screen bottom board on it. With it, I'm thinking, hey, there's nothing in there. They're all dead. With it, and the way this was set up was the brood boxes were on the bottom. There was a queen excluder, and then there was a honey super. Well, there was a hole on the lid on the side of the lid where they could get in and out. Well, the bees got in the honeysuckle, and that's where they started laying their eggs. That's where all the bees were. There was none in the uh, there was none in the brood boxes at all. That hive, I don't know how it survived, but it did. With it. Um, my belief is the bigger issue is moisture. Um, you got to figure out how to get rid of that moisture, or how to deal with that.
Okay, and PK just had a comment here. She said she had more problems with moisture using solid bottom boards than she did with screen bottom boards. And I think that's right along the lines of what you're just saying. So go ahead. We'll let you go ahead and continue here.
Well, the um, gosh, you you know, one thing that I have found with this screen on my little shell is that you have the ability when you reach your hand in there and you move the wood chips to see things, just to fill the wood chips and see how moist they are, or how wet they are, or if they're dry. If they're wet, I will just, I've got the ability to change all those wood chips out and put fresh dry ones in, and do it real quick. Anytime again, anytime I'm in the hives, especially in the wintertime, anytime I'm in the hives in the wintertime, it's a quick in and out with it. Um, I'm concerned about nighttime temperatures, with it. If there's a couple warm days in a row, I try to get in there on the first day. Easier said than done. Sometimes life has a way of stealing your time from you. But that's pretty much what I do with things. How long do you continue feeding them? Well, I will feed my bees until I will feed my bees with sugar, dry sugar, until April. Uh, at the point that the bees stop taking it, then I will look at, well, do I do a sugar wattle um, um, feeding? And I in the springtime, the I will do a sugar wattle feeding with them, but I usually don't do that until maybe towards the end of April, uh, and after the point where you're not taking the sugar anymore. And my sugar is a sugar pollen mixture. You can buy the pollen from like Man Lake, the um, John Hill. I'm not sure if he carries it or not. He may. The pollen is only supposed to be good for a year unless you put it in the freezer. With it. So if you buy a 50-pound bag, that's going to last you a long time. I have the ability to put it in my daughter's freezer, so that's fine. She doesn't use it. I'll use it. I'll pull it out next year. You might not want to get uh, more than a 5 or 10-pound bag, depending on your hives, how many you have with it. Pollen's a little expensive, and I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what it is. But it's too expensive to throw out.
We got some more questions.
Okay.
And you're right. It shocks me every year how much pollen costs. I think I pay $100 for a 100-pound or 50-pound bag, and that's really cheap. When you buy it in the small quantities, it adds up. But it does lose its nutritional value if you don't keep it in a freezer. So it is important as soon as you get it to get it in a freezer. So let's see here. So Tom had a question. He said, Mark mentioned treating as strongly suggested. Has anyone tried making a tea out of rhubarb leaves, then dipping in a sheet of plain paper? After letting the paper dry, you put it in your hive the way you would use mite strips in the fall.
Well, I've never tried that, but the chemical that's in the rhubarb leaves is oxalic acid. That's all that I treat my bees with. Some people use other things, but that's what I use. A lot of people are, in my opinion, or maybe I shouldn't say a lot of people. I will say me. I started off where I was kind of afraid to use that oxalic acid. Um, the I didn't have enough confidence in myself to use it correctly. That's the nice thing about this bee club. They have classes. There will be classes in the fall on how to treat your bees with it. If you do not take advantage of them, you are silly with it. Um, there's also what they call a oxalic acid dribble method that you can use. I haven't used that. I'm not anticipating using that this year, like in the spring, but that's something that I will look into more in the future.
Yeah, so on that topic about the towel or paper, the person that's famous for that is Randy Oliver, and you can find his stuff on scientificbeekeeping.org. And what he was known for was doing is putting oxalic acid. It was like a liquid oxalic acid mixture with shop towels, those blue shop towels. And there's some interesting research. And I think, Mark, you were at that HAS when I was. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot her name, but she's a famous speaker from the University of Georgia, from UGA. She spoke as a keynote and said that University of Georgia and University of Alabama came together and did, which is funny because they never get together. They hate each other for football, but they got together and they did some research on, I want to say it was like 300 hives where they found no benefit from doing that with the blue towels. And Randy is a pretty known guy about stuff. And what they were coming up with is they feel that maybe the temperature had something to do with it, is because there's a very different temperature difference between Georgia and Alabama, especially in the summertime, versus Northern California and stuff like that. So just some things to take into account. There's lots of good articles out there about it, Tom. So there is another one here from Brenda. It says, how often do you replace the wood chips during the winter?
I can tell you, it all depends on how moist they are, how wet they are. I've got about 24 hives this year. I can tell you I've inspected about three times this year. And part of the reasons I've done it so much is I'm kind of retired. You can't go anywhere with this virus. I want to get out of the house. Out of all those 24 hives, there was 2 hives that I thought there was enough moisture in it to change them out. What I do is when I change them out, I put them in a big black garbage bag, and I don't like to leave anything in my bee yard at all. Any debris, any trash of any type, any wax, I put them in a big black trash bag. I put it in the back of my car, and on a sunny day, guess what? That moisture comes out of my wood chips, and I've got plenty of wood chips. Wood chips are pretty cheap. If you buy them, I would encourage you to buy bedding for horses versus for hamsters or something like that. You get probably 4 or 5 more cubic feet for about $1 more. I buy mine at Farm and Fleet with it. I'm not sure how often I will go out and change it between now and spring.
I think you had pretty good advice where you said, I think you were checking it every time you checked your feed, which is about every 3 weeks. You were just giving it a toss with your hand and feeling for moisture. And if you had a bunch of moisture, you're swapping it out, I think you said, right?
Yes. And the other thing is the way I got mine set up, I can't really check my sugar without my sugar levels without opening the top and moving the wood chips. So I have to touch the wood chips in order to do that. That black screen is there. If you can see right through it. You can see if there's bees or there's no bees. The other thing is I don't really disturb the bees too much. So I think there's positive effects with that. If you use the silver or metal screen, you can't see through it as well. It's harder to see through it. you won't do it twice if you have a few hives with it. So I always use the black screen.
So there was another question about the chips as to whether you use pine or whether you use.
Well, I use pine chips. I have seen people use cedar. My question about cedar is like, okay, people use cedar chips sometimes to keep the bugs out. Well, B is a bug. I would be hesitant to use that, and I have just plain old pine shavings, and again, mine is for horse bedding. Farm and Fleet, you can buy I think it's 3 cubic feet for X amount of money. If you turn around, you see horse bedding shavings. It's about 5 or 6 cubic feet. There's a lot more in it, and it's a lot cheaper. Other questions? And let me throw this out there. If there are, well, would be for anybody, but especially new beekeepers. Hey, I'm on the club website all the time. If somebody has a question, if they're not quite sure how to do things, if I can give you advice or provide some mentoring services for you, I'm more than happy to do that. Send me a message and I'll get back in touch with you pretty quick in regards to that. If I don't have to drive, an hour away, if you want to do hive inspections, I'm more than happy to help with that. The only thing that I asked is that you are current on your club dues with it. That the club has provided a lot of good services to me. I'd like to support them, and this is one way of doing it. If you're not a club member, it doesn't really cost a lot. I'd ask you to become a club member before I went out with it. But
So there's another question here about says, do you ever leave any hives unfed and unopened through the winter? If so, what's the result?
Unfed, in general, I will put sugar on top of every hive that I have. The issue is, do they have enough honey to survive the winter? Sometimes they do. There are sometimes that I will open a hive and they've just never touched they've never touched the sugar that I put on it. They have it all winter long. Well, that tells me if they're still alive that there's plenty of food in there. And maybe I think that there's plenty of food in it. I won't take a chance. I will put sugar in it. Gosh, a couple of dollars for some sugar is a lot cheaper than a whole new hive with it. The other thing which I would encourage people to do is on the lid that you have to put some sort of either a weight or some sort of tie down on that. You get these windy days, or if your lid comes off in the winter time, you've got a hive full of dead bees. In order to prevent that from happening, I put something on the lid to keep it down. And most of the time, I put a screw on 2 sides of my hive and just take a piece of string and tie it on, and that keeps it in place.
All right, we got another question here. It says, in case of a late spring freeze, do we need to replace any of our winter protections?
Well, I'm not sure what they mean by winter protections. The,
Hey, Megan, can you unmute and maybe ask your question?
Sure. Sorry about that. I was just thinking, sometimes we have a nice warm spring and we, take off like our moisture boards and our tar paper and all that fun stuff. And then we get hit with a night or a few nights or maybe even a week where it's bitterly cold again. Is it important at that point to go ahead and add that stuff back on? Or, sorry, go ahead.
Megan, if it was me, if I took it off, I don't think I'd want to be putting it back on. And two, there's a difference between one hive or two hives and 10 or 15 hives.
Right.
With it. But with me, I'm not going to take that off until it's good and warm. And a couple years ago, I used black toilet paper on mine. With it, that kind of the warmer it is, the more the bees will produce. They'll start laying. The queen will start laying. That black, in theory, draws the heat, and it's going to encourage the queen to lay more eggs. With it, I just would not be in any hurry to take it off. With it. Yeah, it really depends a lot on how big your cluster is. If the cluster of bees, if there's just a handful in there and they've barely made it this long, and you get a couple more cold days, that could be the end of it. But how do you know how big the cluster is? With it, I don't know. I will not open the brood boxes and look myself. With it, sometimes there are. You will open up a hive and you don't see a bee anywhere. You don't see any signs of bees, or maybe you see a whole bunch of dead bees in the bottom, and you're thinking, well, this hive's dead. I had that happen a couple weeks ago, and then as I'm thinking this hive is dead, all of a sudden, I've got this stick getting out the dead bees on the bottom, and as I run it through there, I probably put out 10 or 15 bees that were alive. Well, I tried to brush those back in and I left them. That hive is still alive. With it. It's just hard to know.
I've had the same thing, Mark, on that one. So PK had a really good point. She says we do have inspections out at Sugar Grove Nature Center. We usually post on Facebook when we are going out. Sometimes it is last minute postings, and that's a good point. That's during the winter and during the summer. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that one. And Kathy had a good comment here. It says many of us have found the hard way that hives will sometimes not survive. How is your success rate with screen and wood chips? I have not heard of that method. And just to double check, that serves as an insulator and moisture absorber, question mark?
Yes, it does serve as both. I've had the best luck doing that. Gosh, this has been really the first year where my work demands has not, my work demands have not been at a point where I could get to my bees. In the past, I retired. Now I've got a little more time than I've ever had. Although I find that I'm busier than I've ever been, but I can kind of go out and pick and choose times and days and things, which is nice. It does two things. It keeps the warm air in, and I can tell you, at least for me, it's a great thrill when you move those wood chips and you can feel the warm air coming up, hitting your face, or feel the warm air on your hand as you're moving them. With it, it's like, okay, this is great. Plenty of sugar. I'll spread those wood chips out again and put the lid back on, and I'm done. And gosh, I can be in and out of a hive in a minute and a half with it. And that's the ideal thing that you want in the wintertime.
So that's a good point. And I've heard a couple people say that they haven't heard of that method before. It's usually called like a quilt box or a quilt blanket or something like that. If you do some Googling on it, there's a lot of different tricks. And Mark, maybe I missed this when you said it. So in your quilt box, can you show that again?
Sure.
But your quilt box, you have holes drilled in it, correct?
Well, I don't have holes in my quilt box. I have holes in my little sugar shell, and the ones on the side,
I see.
I have, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, string stapled to it. And the one that's on what I put it on the direction of my, the opening of my bottom board. And that way, if if the bees come out, they're coming out there. Just a matter of practice. I always try to enter my hive or open it up from the back where the bees do not come out. You get far fewer stings that way. With it, this is nothing special. It's about a 2-inch piece of wood that I cut out. I put these holes in it. I put the screen on it, and then with the honey supers that I've got laying around I don't need for honey, I put that on top of it. And then I put my wood chips in it. Gosh, I tried to put it at least 3/4 of the way to the top. For the most part, that's what I do.
All right. So there's another question here from John. He asks the question I know a lot of people have asked on the forums and stuff is to wrap or not to wrap, and maybe some pros and cons of those.
And gosh, I can tell you I like, in theory, wrapping my hives with it. A lot has to do with how well your boxes fit together with it. I say in theory I like that because I wrapped mine with black tar paper a couple of years ago. That particular year I had more hives die out than I ever had. It wasn't a cold issue, it was a moisture issue. Since that point, I started focusing on the moisture issue, and I have a lot fewer hives die. Gosh, I'm having more problems with mice this year than I am anything. And next year I will do things a little different with the mice. But I don't think I would wrap. I don't. And if I did wrap, I would ideally use that black roll in roofing material. You can buy a roll of it pretty cheap.
Tar paper.
Yeah, and staple it on. Just take a staple, just a hand staple, and staple it on with it. Cuts real easy. That's what I've done. I do try, if I'm able to do this, I will put up some sort of barrier depending on where the hives are at. Although for anybody that happens to get on Route 39 and go to Kappa, there is a pond on the left-hand side, right by the Kappa exit. You'll see 3 hives there. I don't have them wrapped. I don't have any windbreaker on them. They're doing just great with it. I was concerned because there's fields and then there's a pond. There's really nothing to stop the wind from getting to them. They're doing real well.
Okay, so there was another note here. PK pointed out, and she said she made a mistake of putting the wood chips on a paper bag, and the bees chewed through that bag and sent chips all through the hive. And I think That's a really good point, PK, that you're bringing up, is I think a lot of people forget about how much bees chew and what they can chew through. They will chew through wood, they'll chew through cardboard, they'll chew through anything that's in there.
And last year, and I try to learn from my mistakes. Last year, I got the bright idea of putting the wood chips in a pillowcase and kind of buttoning them in a pillowcase, and then just put the whole pillowcase in a box. What I found was that the wood chips really didn't absorb much moisture with it. That's why I went from that to the screen on my sugar shell. And there is, the screen keeps the wood chips out of the hive. Does a real nice job.
So PK has a point out here. She says, I think that the black overheats the hive during the day, but doesn't insulate at night. And I assume she's probably talking about that black tar paper.
Yep.
Or the plastic wraps and things like that.
Yep.
I can say from my opinion, my hives are painted all different colors, mostly not white. And I kind of agree. There's some folks from like the Ohio Beekeepers and the Heartland Honeybee Cooperative that speak quite a bit about using dark colors or earth tones and stuff like that, so it does gather sun. Because I think during the summertime, bees can really dissipate quite a bit of heat, surprising amount of heat. And during the wintertime, it doesn't do much harm there. It will allow them to break cluster and move some sugar around and do those kinds of things, but it's just another option there. They don't always have to be white. And I think a lot of beekeepers start and think, well, they've always been white before, I got to make mine white. So just they don't.
And the paint that I use for my hives is usually whatever I can get that's free, or $1 a gallon. With it, other than a red color, which the bees can't really see red. I get what I get, and if I have 3 or 4 gallons of it, or 3 or 4 half gallons, I'll mix it all together to get one solid color, whatever it is.
So, and another note on here, I think somebody was just posting about it. I believe it was Polly earlier. I didn't read it off because I just figured she was just sharing the info, but it's pro tip was that she does veil up, if it is anything other than frigid, because the bees do fly, and a lot of times they're very defensive during that time of year.
Yeah. Okay. This, gosh, in my opinion, this club is a very nice club as far as getting information or the ability to get some hands-on experience. The people have to take advantage of it, but there's multiple hives at the Sugar Creek or Sugar Grove Nature Center. They do hive inspections there. There's no reason people can't go and learn how to do things, or find out what they're looking at. Sometimes I know with me, when I was starting out, I was scared to get in there, scared to get into the boxes. With it, I really had no one to ask questions about things, but this club's really good about that, and I would encourage everybody to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that Mark brings up is, get more than one mentor, because, the way I do it versus the way Mark does it, or the way Royden does it, or the way PK does it, we all got some things that we do and don't do differently. And it's always good to see those things and ask questions and find out what that best method is for you. And I think every person you work bees with, you'll learn something you like and something you hate.
Donna,
Or at least for me, it seems that way.
Donna, bring her to me, honey. Bring her to me.
Yeah, we want to see your dog, Mark.
Yeah, there's 2 of them here. This is the troublemaker.
Aw.
Comes alive about 7 o'clock at night.
All right. So Mark, do you have anything else to share? If not, we'll go into our question and answer.
No, really, nothing more other than, those resources here, take advantage of them. If somebody ever wants to send me a message about something, I'll get back with you and do what I can for you. I'm more than happy to do it. All that I ask is that you become a member of the club.
Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead real quick. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to unmute and just ask those questions. Sometimes people are a little shy or don't know how to get to the text box. Go ahead and ask any questions here that we might have for Mark. Okay, it's kind of quiet here. So I guess what we'll do is we'll go into the question and answer part. And you know what, I'm gonna say let's do it by voice. So we'll see how that goes. And if we have trouble, we'll switch back over to the chat box. But let's do it by voice. So go ahead. Any questions going on?
Okay, Tom, one of the things I would say, especially with mentoring, is always ask why they're doing it, how they came to that decision, because it may not necessarily always work for you, but if you know the why they're doing it, that helps you make a decision what will work best for you.
Yeah, I agree with that comment. That is a really good idea, because the way somebody manages, 10 colonies or 14 colonies might be very different than somebody that has 1 or 2, especially, when you talk about expense and time and things like that. That is a great point. And I guess I want to add one other thing. I'm sorry to hog this, but Mark had mentioned, a bag of sugar is cheap. And I say that all the time. And it's a bag of sugar is $2, $2.50, something like that. And, I'd be surprised if you go through more than one bag through the winter. I mean, you might, but if you put it just on top of the cluster, that's pretty cheap. But even if you go through 2 or 3 bags, that sure beats a $125 package.
And one thing that I do with come spring, I will go through my hives, and any sugar that's stale, I don't dump it out. I put it in a 5-gallon bucket and I use it next year with it. And if there are dead bees or something in it, well, guess what? Next year they go on top of the hive with it. So what's pretty good for me.
I think Cindy was saying before, and I know I do it too, is I'll just take all that and collect it up and make syrup out of it in the spring.
Yeah.
So you can, there's multiple uses for it for sure. So one thing I wanted to add, when you said that you added pollen to your sugar mixture, the one thing I would caution people is that, when you're feeding in November, December, January, and maybe even into February, kind of go easy on that pollen. I wouldn't be over maybe 3 or 4% on that for the mixture, because sometimes you can cause them to start to build up from that, and you might want to be cautious of that when it's cold, because a lot of times they'll make brood and they'll die protecting that brood, trying to keep it warm. So definitely go easy on that pollen portion, so like 2%, 3% maybe of your total weight or sugar weight, that is.
Tom, I had another question, and I hope this isn't something that has already been discussed, but because I didn't take any honey off of my hives this year, I had a full honey super on 2 of the deeps. So I left it on there, but then I also put on my feeding shim and sugar on top of that. But when I've done a real quick check, it doesn't look like the bees are clustered underneath where I've put the sugar. So do I need to keep a close eye on that honey super to see, like, if they've eaten all that honey, they're not necessarily going to be, the cluster isn't going to be in that upper super, they're going to be down in the deep. And then even if I have that sugar above the super, they're not going to get to it. Is my thinking right there?
Mark, you want to give that a shot?
Well, I guess a couple of things. If you didn't take any honey off and it was a productive hive, they don't need the sugar to eat. They've got plenty of honey. I don't know if you treat for mites, And if you did, I don't know what you used to treat with. Sometimes,
I did a Apivar treatment in the midsummer, and then I did oxalic acid in the early fall.
the I'd have to look it up, but some things that you treat with, you're not supposed, if the honey's on it, you're not supposed to consume the honey.
Right. And that's why we didn't take any honey off of them. So I did kind of a late split, but there still wound up being 2 pretty full supers, and I just left them on.
Yeah.
But I thought if they eat all that honey in those supers and they're down in the deep, they're not necessarily going to come up to the top to get the sugar if they run out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and if you didn't pour any honey, they probably have plenty of honey, plenty of food
okay.
without going to the sugar.
Okay.
If it was me, if they haven't had any of the honey yet, every 3-4 weeks I would look, even if I thought there was plenty of honey in there, just see if there's sugar in it or if there's not sugar in it.
Yeah, I've been checking them, and at first they ate a bunch of the sugar and then they just stopped and they haven't touched it since. So I've been checking it like about every 3 weeks or so, and it's still there, but.
And I wonder if they were taking that sugar, putting it in some of the comb.
Yeah, I wonder the same thing. Yeah.
I've had mine do that. They'll move it into the comb.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll find, usually it's in spring, that I'll find all of a sudden there's just a ton of the sugar down in the bottom, on the bottom board. Well,
yeah.
And I'm thinking at that point in time, they're just wanting that sugar out of there. They're wanting to get rid of it. They're not going to eat any more of it. They're just trying to get rid of it. That's my thoughts.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, ma'am. Any other questions?
So I guess we never said in the very beginning, I see a lot of names on here, and I see some new names on here. Welcome to anybody new that's jumping in one of the meetings. Hopefully, if you're not a member, you're going to go ahead and fill out your registration. And we kind of keep harping at that. And the reason why we harp at that is really out of that membership, the majority of it goes to the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. And the reason, just so you know, the reason why our club chooses to be associated with it, we don't have to, but the reason why we choose to be associated with the Illinois Beekeepers Association, well, there's a couple of reasons, but one of the big ones is that they insure our events. So if we have like bee inspections at Sugar Grove and there's something that happens, they do insure those events. Or if we have a class or something like that, as long as we register that information, those events are covered under their policies, and that's kind of a big deal. And that's one of the reasons why we're super comfortable inviting people out that have never touched bees before. A lot of times we'll have people at Sugar Grove that have never done it before, and we'll get an extra veil out for them, or we've done that before for the University of Illinois folks. So that's always kind of an exciting thing to do the first time people get to see bees. So that's one of the reasons why we push that. The Illinois State Beekeepers Association also did an event a while ago that made it legal for us to process honey in our houses. And up until that time, honey was not covered under the Cottage Food Act, and you had to have a certified honey house. So that's kind of a big deal, because it's quite a bit of money to have one of those, and not all of us can really afford. I can't even afford to do it with 75 or 100 hives. So it's just not a good decision for me yet. But that's a really good thing for hobbyists that have 2, 3, 4, 10, 15 hives. That saves a lot of things. And there's a lot of other reasons, good things that association does legally and stuff like that. So that's kind of why we do that. And the majority of those dues does go to the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. And the rest of that is what we use for doing our giveaways and stuff like that during the class, and other activities that we have. Paying for the bees that we have out at Sugar Grove, for example, to get those hives started, and things like that. And that's a great resource to have, 2, 3, 4, 6 hives out there to go through, because that's really when you learn. is when you go through multiple hives next to one another. Like a friend of mine always says 6 hives is kind of the magic number for him to kind of see these things. So just a tip there. Okay, so there's a question here in the chat from Polly, and it says, to Tom's point about processing honey in our homes, do you also need a food safety handler certificate under the Cottage Food Act? So that's a good question. You do not. So it's kind of under the Cottage Food Act, but it's not. So it was under the Illinois Apiary Act that they enacted those things, but it's documented under the Cottage Food Act. So normally under the Cottage Food Act, if for those of you that aren't familiar with this, it allows people to make certain items in their home and sell them as food products. So things like a wedding cake or cupcakes or cookies or those kinds of things. There's a list of things that fall under the criteria as safer food products. And typically the requirements for those food products is that you have to list the ingredients and you have to list the location where they were processed and that it was a home kitchen, and you have to have the address of the location, things like that. And you do typically have to go through that class, either online or in person somewhere. So for the Illinois Honey Act, you do not need to do that. So there's another question here. It says, what is the policy again on attending the 101 class?
Okay,
Payment. So
I'll go
PK,
ahead and yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, so if you've taken the class before, all you have to do is renew your membership for this year. Remember, everybody expired at December 31st. So you renew your membership. I would like you to, on our Facebook page, we've got like a Google Doc to kind of register, do an initial registration. But once you have paid this year's dues, I can connect you to that link. So if you do that initial registration, that's great. If you want to, and again, anybody who's been a member before, so in other words, you were last year's member or the year before that, we're kind of, because we're doing an online one rather than in person, we kind of said, okay, this is one of the perks for being a member with that. But if somebody has never taken the class, never been a member, that registration, we do ask for $40 for that, because again, and we have some pretty good door prizes. The Hive and two $50 gift certificates to Hilco is door prizes for that. So if there's any questions, you can email me, pjkorand@gmail, or call me 309-826-0089, or contact one of our board members. We can all help you with that. So we really encourage you. And even if and I can send you an agenda, and you can say, oh, I want to see this again, or, oh, I'm comfortable with that. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to see out of that class. So we've got the agenda, so you can kind of have an idea of which ones you want to see again. And again, anybody's got a question, just let me know.
Hey, Tom, can you talk, Tom Pinkonen, can you talk again about the, which organization does the honey stuff or the regulations for selling honey?
yeah, I mean, you could just Google Illinois honey labeling standards and you'll find it, but it's under the Illinois Cottage Food Act guide. You know
Well,
what?
I looked there and I couldn't find anything specifically for honey, so maybe I just didn't dig deep enough.
There was a thread on our Facebook feed. I'll try and find that. I'll put it on my to-do list here, but I'll try and post that out on the Facebook feed or tag you in that other thread.
Okay, thanks. I just wasn't able to find anything under the cottage food stuff, so that would be great. Thank you.
And you know, for those of us who will have a little success with our hives and find that we have more honey than what we can consume or give to our family and neighbors, I would say don't sell your honey. Don't sell your honey. Don't put a price on your honey that's giving it away. With it. Um, Gosh, the honey sells for $15, $20 a pint. That's what I get for it. With it. Um, every year I think to myself, gosh, what am I going to do with all this honey? That's usually in the fall, and before spring, I find myself in the position I'm in right now. Gosh, I wish I had about 15 or 20 more gallons of honey that I could sell. With it. Um, so just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you add up what you got in bees, you know, and then like what your hardware and your bees cost and your time and stuff like that. I mean, I obviously I love bees and it's kind of my thing, but the it's a lot cheaper to go to the store and buy honey. But I don't think you're gonna find much more fun than learning about bees and working on them and doing some of that stuff. And yeah, it is frustrating, but when it comes together, it's pretty awesome.
Needless to say, the 95 degree days that you spend out there working your bees, it's a lot of work. And around here, really $10 a pound is kind of the going price, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the majority of people. I see people getting $15 a pound. I think the ladies down in Hayworth were even higher than that on their regular honey and some of their flavored honeys and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. And actually, that's a really good point. So when Polly was asking about food safety stuff, so once you do anything other than take the honey from the comb and put it in a bottle, anything other than that, or selling comb honey, and actually I don't think comb honey falls underneath that act, just FYI. It's just extracting honey from frames. Anything more than that, then you do get into food safety rules, which can get pretty hairy. Most of that needs to be done in commercial kitchens. Most of that has to be done by people that have food safety, health inspected facilities. And to, Illinois and their infinite wisdom, there's not a consistent law across the state. So each county has different regulations for that. And McLean is one of the most strict. Actually, McLean has more strict rules than Cook County when it comes to those things. So if you're going to do infused hunting, keep that in mind. That technically, and I'm not the food police here, but depending on where you sell it, you're technically required to be following food safety on all that stuff. Now, is somebody going to come check you? Who knows?
Okay, yeah, the ladies down at Wild Harvest Honey Pound. Now she has a beautiful bottle marketing, and she will probably be doing. We will do connoisseur type of class at their facility. She's done that, so she does a nice job with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't criticizing that. There's a lot of people that will charge $5 a pound for their honey, and I've seen people $15-20 a pound for honey locally, and I've seen even higher than that, in other areas and stuff like that based on demand. Keep in mind, when you're figuring all this stuff out as a new beekeeper, I highly recommend you put this stuff in Excel or you put it in Google Sheets and look at what you got in it and really use that to evaluate how much you charge for it, because everything does start to add up by the time you figure out a jar and a label and your time and things like that. Make sure that you're that's part of being sustainable.
Just as an example, Tom, last fall, I have 19 hives currently. And last fall, I probably fed through August into the fall, I probably fed 700 pounds of sugar water to feed them for winter, to feed them up solid for winter. And so that's just one of the expenses. Then we've got all the chemicals to treat them, to keep them healthy. and all the hardware. There is a lot more involved than a lot of people would think.
And the cost of bottles.
Yeah,
The,
labeling.
the other thing is, especially for the new people here, I don't want to scare anybody off. Gosh, that's the nice thing about this club. You can learn how to do things. You can get help with things. They have hives that we inspect. There's just a abundance of knowledge with the club, and a abundance of people that's willing to help with it. You just have to ask.
What other questions do we got? So while we're waiting for people to come up with some questions, something to keep in mind is our Facebook page that we have out there, Central Illinois Beekeepers Association. It's one of the largest pages on Facebook for the state of Illinois clubs, which is kind of exciting. And we have a lot of people that aren't in Bloomington and aren't even in the state of Illinois following it for various reasons. But something to keep in mind there is that there's a lot of content on that page. So if you, depending on whether you're using a web browser or whether you're using your phone, keep in mind that you can go and search those things. You can go search through those threads and see previous questions out there. And I'm not discouraging you from asking the same question again, but what's really interesting is I've seen different responses when it is asked. And I mean, hell, even myself, I think I've answered things differently depending on the situation. So definitely go through and do some searching on there. Even if you're not a new beekeeper, you might be surprised with some of the things you find out there. And I've seen some threads get revived here recently that were fairly old.
And it may be a little early to put this plug in, but I'm a little shameless here. Anybody that comes up with a swarm in the spring and they want to get rid of it, give me a call. I'll come and get it.
Yeah, that's a good comment there, and I'm not begging for your bees, but I will. But if you
Yeah, good point.
So what I was going to say is I have no idea what PK was trying to say there for a second, but we'll come back to her. But as your hives get strong, before it becomes a problem that they're swarmy, reach out to people here and get with them and say, hey, can somebody mute that's talking there? So if your hives are getting strong, have somebody come out and help you. Mark helps. I have people out to my place all the time working bees. There's I don't know, probably a dozen plus people that are very helpful on that can help you make a split and do that before it's a problem. And there's people that can help you with, once they do get swarmy, on how to salvage some of that situation. So anybody that wants help with that, I mean, I've probably had 10 people come out last year and just grab a nuke and put their bees into it and make the split until they could get hardware from John or something like that. That's the benefit of the clubs. There's people to reach out to, and a lot of people are pretty generous with their time and equipment and stuff like that to say, here, I'll spot you in the meantime. And if you can only have a limited number of hives on your property, there's plenty of people on the Facebook page that would gladly help you out with those situations.
Also, just something to mention, this happened 2 years ago. A lady had a very strong hive coming out of spring or going into spring. She had a swarm. It was really pretty early for any bees to swarm. It was real early. With it, went out there and looked at her hive. Gosh, there was no flowers even blooming. She had her bees coming out of the window was just jam packed full of bees. And when they get that full of bees, then they start making queen cells and they start swarming. Um, the I don't think there was hardly anything that was blooming. As I'm standing there, it's like 2 or 3 more swarms come out of this hive. The queens come out. The bees or clusters of bees or balls of bees are following them. The as I always say, it's kind of like a tornado with all the bees going all different directions, zigzagging around. Gosh, I pulled 2 frames out and we counted 28 queen cells that was on those 2 frames. And her brood box was like too deep. I didn't even go to the bottom one with it. She needed to split those hives. And she should have already have done it. But if you got hives, if now they're doing well, gosh, springtime comes, you need to really check them. And if they're too crowded, either you will do something or they will do something. But those bees will not be in that same box. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I like the way you say that. Is either you'll take action or they'll take action. Sometimes both, but it's the earlier you get after them, the more you can prevent that situation from becoming bad. And something else to take into account is if you have one strong or a couple strong hives coming out of winter and you're buying more packages or something like that to expand, you can take a frame of dark brood and put it in with your package once she starts laying. And that's a huge boost. That's 9,000 bees in a deep frame. So that'll do nothing but help that colony really grow fast. So that's another way to get rid of some bees is if you're starting some new colonies, you can always rob some from the other hive. Just make sure you don't take the queen.
And if you find yourself that, in a situation where hey, I only want 1 hive, or I only want 2 hives, or I don't want more than 3, there's other people in the club that will be happy to take those off your hands, whether that's me or somebody else with it. But as I say, either you will take care of the problem or they will take care of the problem. But the problem will get resolved with it.
Mike, you got a question?
Okay, Tom, I was just going to try and tag onto your one statement about in a situations, sometimes you do one thing when one thing is happening, but treat it differently at another situation. In other words, you might do a split in the spring, but in the fall you might not. So sometimes depending on what the full situation is, time of year, as to what your decisions are. So again, understanding that why.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So a lot of times when somebody asks a question, you'll see a lot of people chime in with answers, but then you'll see some other people chime in and ask more questions. And a lot of times, the frustrating part for new and old beekeepers is the fact that if you ask a couple of beekeepers, you'll get a ton of answers. And the old adage was, you ask 10 beekeepers, you'll get 20 answers. And I'll definitely give you that. I can give you all kinds of different ways to solve problems, and that's and sometimes that's frustrating, and sometimes that's actually the really cool part about beekeeping, is that there's not always one answer. So the way Mark does something versus the way I do something can be different, and that's okay. Or sometimes we'll say the same answers. It just depends. There's different ways of doing it, and there's lots of questions to ask about those things. Like for example, what kind of hives you're running? Are these Langstroths? Are these long Langstroths? Are these top bars? Are these Wares? Are they, yeah, I can go on and on. There seems like a ton of different hives. Are they flow hives? Are they all these other things that can be possible, because that a lot of that plays into the mix, and what time of the year plays into the mix. And Tom posted in here that our tentative topic for March is going to be about planning for how to prevent swarming and those types of things. And I think I'm giving that presentation. So with spring treatment, let's see, spring treatment, preventing swarms, swarm catching, and installing packages is going to be the topic for that one. And I kind of have some different theories on stuff than maybe is traditional. Kind of so spoiler alert, the old school method of splitting your hives in the spring isn't always the best method. Now, sometimes you have the situation Mark described where you have to make a split, and hopefully you're gonna see that before it becomes an issue. But sometimes you have to make that split. But if you do, we'll talk about what you do when you make that split. So when you're making that split, you're then making the decision on how that hive is going to perform through the season. And sometimes splitting in the spring is not the right decision, or maybe splitting it in different manners is a better decision. And we'll go through those topics in depth. And if you're a new beekeeper, don't panic about it. You can ask lots of good questions, and I guarantee you're going to be overwhelmed. There's a lot to learn, and you don't have to learn it all. It is definitely drinking out of a fire hose, but just keep asking those questions. And really, the only dumb question is to not ask the question.
I would say too, my belief is the worst thing you can do if you are a beekeeper is be afraid of getting in your hives. If you're afraid of getting in your hives and you don't get in them, you're not going to learn anything. You've got to seek out knowledge. Sometimes you have to do things that's uncomfortable for you. Gosh, I remember installing my first package of bees. It was scary, and now I don't think I wouldn't think twice about it. So you just have to get that comfort. That level of comfort has to be gained with a little knowledge and experience.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, and that's something where working with a mentor will really help. I was laughing with a friend, in the fall, where people say, "Boy, my bees are super defensive, or they're ferocious, and this and that," and we'll go out and work bees with them, and a lot of times I'll just be wearing a jacket, or I mean, Mark's worked bees with me before where I'm wearing shorts, shorts and Crocs, and I'll have a veil on or something like that, and that's it. And as a matter of fact, Mark's been out there working without a veil with me with my hives, which I'll rarely ever do, but just because I hate getting stung in the eye. But those are all things that you learn, and you'll learn like what defensive bees are, and what just learning about your bees, so that the first time you put that package in, boy, I'll tell you what, that's a wild rush when you do it and you think you're going to die. But as you work with your hives, a year or 2 years later, you'll probably look back at yourself and say, boy, I learned an awful lot during that time. So working with mentors with their hives is a good idea, as well as working with your hives. So I'll have people ask me all the time, can you come go through my hives with me? And sometimes I'll say yes, but a lot of times I'll say, how about you come work hives with me? Because you can come here and we'll go through as many hives until you give up. So we can go through 5, or we can go through 10 hives, which you might only have 1 or 2 at your house. And when you look at 5 together is when you'll pick up on some of these things, and you'll get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mark's done it with me a bunch of times, and seeing those things, and then talking about how am I going to deal with the situation that I just saw in this hive, or how do I fix this? And that's really helpful as well. So definitely when you find that mentor, work both ways. So have them come by you, and then you go by them as well, because you can learn things there. And like, for example, you may go to their place, like Lewis, for example, from our club, had a top bar hive, and I'd never worked a top bar hive until he had that event at, when we went back to his house and had a little picnic there after we inspected hives. And that's the first time I had ever touched that. I don't have one of those. Or like Mark has some long Langstroths, and that's a great opportunity to be able to see those things. So hopefully the alumni thing is gotten across to everybody. I know we mentioned it a bunch of times, but if you've ever taken the class before, come join us on Saturday again and take it again, because a lot of times a year or two experience under your belt, you'll look at things very differently. Because I think Kathy said this to me before, where she said, boy, that first time I took that class, I zoned out after a certain period of time just because I was so overwhelmed with things, or I just didn't understand what some of these words were that you were saying. And I know, like Cindy, for example, is the reason why we have that alumni deal. Is she said, "Can I come back and take the class again the next year? Because the last time I took it, I didn't understand, or I couldn't take it all in, or my brain was mush after lunch, that kind of thing." So definitely take advantage of coming and taking that class again, because I'll tell you a couple reasons. Number one, the first time you're going to be overwhelmed. The number two, you're gonna know things that you didn't know then. And number three, we mixed up, who's given those presentations. So sometimes Mark's spin on a presentation versus Tom's spin on a presentation versus PK's spin on a presentation will give you different insights. So that's all good reasons to take that.
We also have a state inspector presenting, so it's always great to know who he is and to hear from him.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I know I've said everything's a great point, but so meeting Jim before you need Jim is a great thing. So Jim Wellwood is our state inspector for our region, and even if you're not in our region, he can get you hooked up with who your right person is. But knowing Jim and knowing what Jim can help you with, and knowing that he's just a pretty nice guy, that you can reach out to him about things and how he likes to be reached out to, and like he'll say the same thing, or I'll say it for him, is that pictures worth 1,000 words. So sending him pictures when you text him about questions can really help things out. So he's going to spend over an hour talking about some things. So definitely a good opportunity there.
And Wellwood will walk away with some of your food if you've got any to offer him. He's happy to help you with sharing some calories.
That's a solid point. I've made him lunch and dinner, and bought him lunch and dinner.
And banana bread from one of my kids that was in the mood to bake. So just saying.
I am frequently in the El Paso, the Kappa area, the Downs area, Chenoa area, and of course I live in Bloomington Normal. If anybody has hives and they want me to come and look at them, mentoring them, if people are in those areas, I'm more than happy to do that. All you have to do is reach out to me.
And I think another good plug is, as you're looking through all these bee magazines and catalogs and stuff like that, and I'm sorry to push gear and stuff like that, but really when you said El Paso, it made me think of it. John Hill is an excellent resource to go, even if you don't go buy anything, don't tell him I said that, but you can go up there and see some of this gear firsthand and before you go buy it in a catalog, and see like what you really need versus what they're telling you need to buy. Because those, I think Randy Washburn says it really well, is by the time you're done with that catalog, you got $2,000 worth of gear picked out. And really the only things you need to really get started is a veil, a hive tool, a smoker, and what you're going to put your bees in. And that's really it. From there, you can kind of wing it and get some other things. Is that the best idea? Maybe not, but there's all different ways to do this. So utilize John, go up there and check out his place. I know we're in COVID time and all that, but you can walk through and see a bunch of that gear firsthand and see. I'll vouch for his quality. The stuff that I've gotten from him is sometimes better than select grade I've gotten from other stuff before I knew better.
So does the state inspector generally inspect first year apiaries? I was surprised that I didn't hear from him last year.
No. So he'll periodically check in with people, and actually each inspector is a little bit different. So I've had other people in other regions of the state that have never seen an inspector in 10 years. So Jim's really active. So he usually will check in with you in your first 2-3 years. Some people he will check in regularly. But more importantly, all you got to do is call or text him and say, hey, I'd like to have you come out and check my stuff and take a look through here. It's, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but the state has done a great job with that program. It's something that they haven't monkeyed up yet. So the gym anyways is a really good resource to go through things and kind of get a third party view on it. Like all beekeepers, he does have his views of how to do it, but he's a pretty patient guy, and he has I think he has a pretty good method of teaching, and I think he's pretty approachable. So he's a great resource to lean on and say, I got something funky going on here. Can you come take a look? Did that answer your question, Riva?
Yeah, that's good. And then I also posted a link to something that I found on the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. They've got a discount deal right now for EpiPens. So if you need to keep an EpiPen handy for visitors or whatever, that looks like a pretty good deal.
PK, do you want to give your EpiPen spiel?
Yeah,
PK, yeah,
for the most part, have it available. Have it available. I went to my doctor and said, hey, I had, because if you're in a situation where you do have a response, the body's having a response, and it can be pretty challenging when the airway starts breaking down. Sometimes the stings, if I get stung on my hand, that's not a big issue. My hand swells, okay. I get stung on my neck, my face, my mouth, the tongue, and it starts swelling. That can interfere with your airway. And that's when you need that EpiPen, because you might not have time to get to the hospital or get EMTs there. So depending on where you're at. So I am very pro on, you want to prevent problems, but also be prepared if you do have problems. And, most of my EpiPens have expired and just had to exchange it for a new one. They're probably about a 2-year, maybe 3-year life on them before you replace them. So and it's fairly easy administration of it. So
yeah, it's
I can
super
train
easy.
anybody.
Yeah, they have a really good video on their website. There's plenty of YouTube videos on it, and there's plenty of horror stories about doing it wrong. They've changed the design from back when I was an EMT. It was pretty easy to put it through your finger, giving it to someone. Now they've changed that, so it's I would say almost impossible to put it through your finger. So that's good. I will say they are heat and cold sensitive, so be cautious with that. That said, I do usually keep a set in my glove box, just because that way they're there in the truck where I'm going to be working bees. That I think there's a good point is a lot of us have bees in very remote spots. Like if you go to PK's house and you go play with the bees with her, I don't think you're going to be able to coach an ambulance to her if she had a problem. You know what I mean? If she wasn't able to get to the house, the likelihood of them finding her out there is probably slim to none. So like some of my bee yards, there's no way somebody's going to find me. Even if I gave you that long, I don't think you're going to be able to find me. So having those things to self-rescue is always a good idea. And you just, as a beekeeper, it's a little different than going and walking through the park and having some bees come upon you. Like a lot of times things go poorly for beekeepers, especially like I had hives out in a rural spot where coyotes were running deer, and the coyotes figured out that if they jammed the deer into the spot behind my hives, they could get the smaller, slower deer. So the deer, after seeing some of the others go down, realized, well, we'll just jump and plow through these hives and knock them down. So the landowner would call me up and say, hey, you got a problem here. You might want to come check this out. And sometimes I might get a call from him at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, just as it's starting to get dark. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You got to flip them back up, and you might get a bunch of stings doing that. So it is a good idea to have those, because you never know how you're going to react at certain times. Or you may have people like at my house. A lot of people have come and done bee pickups with me, and you'll see my sister out there. She's allergic to bees and will go in anaphylactic shock. So having them around just in case something does go poorly is a plus. But they can be costly, especially if you don't have insurance that'll cover it or cost you. So there's a question here. It says, what are the benefits of asking an inspector to come out versus asking a club member? So one thing I want to add to this is, so beekeepers are an interesting lot, and I can definitely wave the flag for that one. But you kind of have to be to jump into a box with 60,000 stinging insects. But a lot of beekeepers, and this is, I'll jump off my soapbox here in a minute. One of the reasons why I like working bees is because out of the list of people that are on this meeting, we're all very, very different people, and we all have very different beliefs, and we have all different views and stuff like that. And one of the things I really like about beekeeping is we can come together on this meeting and talk about bees and not worry about those other views that we have. And we can all be friends and talk about bees and smile and laugh and have a good time about it. And not knowing those other things. So a lot of times, and I'm not saying this is your question here, Myra, is or if I hope I pronounced your name right. Sometimes a lot of people are very apprehensive of having someone come out and inspect their bees, and especially apprehensive of having the state come out and inspect them. So the state program is free. So in the state of Illinois, you don't have to pay a fee to go. God, that's a cute pup. You don't have to pay a fee to have your apiary license. In other states you do. Like my friend paid $250 to have his hives brought into Texas. So just keep that in mind. So it is free in the state of Illinois. But what do you get that's different? That's a good question. So a lot of times the inspector can take a sample and send that sample to the Beltsville, Maryland USDA lab. Now, I just learned as of last year that any of us can go do that. So, as a matter of fact, I've done it myself. Jim's just given me the address and I've sent it. So that is one thing that before he was the only one that could do that for free. But I guess now we can all do that. But I guess what you get is the experience of somebody that's gone through maybe 5,000 or 10,000 hives in a season. And that's really a big difference than somebody like myself or somebody like Mark. Not to say that Mark doesn't know what he's doing, but Mark didn't go through 10,000 hives last year. So that's something you do get there. But by all means, do it all. Have the inspector come out and look, and have people from the club come and look. So hopefully that answered your question.
And my experience with the inspectors are they're very nice people. With it, I wasn't really sure what to expect or to think in regards to some of these bee inspectors. Gosh, getting to know them, they're just super nice people, super helpful. It's kind of a blessing to have their name and number, and being able to call them or ask for information. Super good guys.
Yeah, so a great example is last year I had a customer think that they had European foul brood early in the season. So she thought she had European foul brood, I think in May or something like that. And I told her, I said, I don't think you do, but you know what, don't take my word for it. Call Jim and have him come test it. And he was able to come out and get a swab on it and get it sent into the Maryland lab. Now, keep in mind, that's not something that happens overnight. So you don't get those results back the next day or something like that. Sometimes it might be a month. Like last year, I've participated in a national honeybee survey like 4 times now. I still haven't gotten my report for the honeybee survey that we did in September. So sometimes those reports take long. Usually the foul brood tests happen fairly quickly within a couple weeks. So that's something to keep in mind there.
Hey, Tom, also in regard to, some people might think, oh, state inspector, he's going to pop me for this or he's going to pop me for that. That he's not like that at all. I live in Bloomington and I had a couple extra nukes up on the roof whenever he came and inspected my hives up there. Because what I do is I bring them here because I seem to have really good success here for breeding queens in my area of Bloomington. And he said, he basically said, by the way, do you know you're only supposed to have 2 hives? He said, I don't care. But just to let you know, making me aware. He was being very nice about it. He wasn't condemning me. I didn't have my numbers on the hives and it was no big deal to him. He let me know that, that I should have them posted. But he's very easygoing that way. He's
I agree.
He's not like the angry cop that's having a bad day, nothing
And
like
I think most of the inspectors are that way through the state. I know the folks down in Southern Illinois do have a little apprehension of their inspector because they do throw the European foulbrood flag quite a bit, but they also have had European foulbrood quite a bit. So that's just something to take into account.
He's also a state inspector and not a Bloomington code enforcement officer.
That's correct. He has nothing to do with the city. He is a state. He's contracted for a period of time. So keep in mind, he's going to come speak at our class, but he's not getting paid by the state for that. So he's on a contracted term. I think last year they really cut him pretty tight, but I think it was April through September, and I think that's when he stopped, was the end of September. Usually in the past he's gone through November and started up in, I think, late February. So they've been pretty tight with those contracts, and a lot of times he doesn't know. Like last year, I don't think they got their contracts until the very end of March. So I'm sorry, the end of March. So keep that in mind. But usually he'll still solicit calls and stuff like that. But he has nothing to do with the city of Bloomington and reporting you or doing. He has no power over all that stuff. So keep that in mind. He's not going to be the one to throw the shenanigans flag at anything like that. And matter of fact, I cannot confirm or deny, but in the past he's been pretty blasé about those things and not even known some of the details of the regulations and things like that. And he's definitely not going to be the one of saying, "Gee, is a nuke a colony?" I don't know.
Well,
those kinds of details.
Yeah, the thing, my point is, he was making me aware of a couple things, but he wasn't judgmental in any way, and he really just wasn't concerned about it, even though, there were a couple of things that he saw, and he just made me aware. And
that's a great point. A long time ago, I got pulled into an issue up in Towanda where a homeowners organization wanted the bees out. So there was a person that she was a club member for a bit that had 2 hives up there, and the homeowners association was putting pressure on them that they needed to get rid of those bees. So they started hitting up. They wanted me to come out there and say that they weren't managing their bees correctly. And I said, look, I'm not going to come do that. That's not my job. But have the state inspector come out there, and that state inspector towed the line for them and told the homeowners association they're not doing anything wrong here. They've managed these hives correctly. They've done everything they possibly can. There's no way that 100% they can prevent swarms, those kinds of things. You are in the wrong asking them to move these hives, those kinds of things. So he's actually taken the beekeeper side several times, I know, with some of these organizations that want to get rid of hives.
That said, from a real estate standpoint, I don't know how they could have probably enforced that if they really wanted to.
Well, luckily they moved out of state and it didn't become an issue. He got transferred.
Problem solved.
So there's lots of good information in the IM here. Go ahead and look through the chat about EpiPens and deals and things like that. I know in the past there was some ruckus about how much those pens cost and some of those details. She's posted some information about some of the coupons available for cost sharing on that stuff. Those things can be pretty pricey. Do keep in mind that when you do administer an EpiPen, it does make you pretty crazy. Like it's a big adrenaline boost and stuff like that. So it's usually advised that after you administer an EpiPen, you do get checked out at a hospital.
All right, we usually wrap these up about 9 o'clock, and we're
Okay,
quickly
Tom.
approaching that.
Tom, one more thing. On an EpiPen, that is a prescription. So it's a situation. So I have a prescription for me. If I administer it to somebody else, I'm kind of in a gray area. But it's one of those things where if they're losing their ability to breathe, I'm going to go ahead and take my pen and inject it. And hopefully the consequences won't be there. But again, you need to be aware that it is considered a prescription, and giving it to somebody who it's not prescribed for gets you into a little bit of a legal liability. But that's my stance on how I would handle it. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you, PK. That's a good point to make on that. All right.
Just a shameless plug there. PK does do the wilderness first aid classes at Wild Country, so she's had some experience with that.
All right, and with that, I think we're gonna wrap this up. Hope to see many of you participating in our class. Again, please get registrations sent in for membership, whether you attend the class or not. Kathy put a link out in the chat to a form so we can easily print that off from Facebook and get that sent into PK, and her address is on that form. And our next class, or our next meeting is, I know Patty, you just sent that out and I forgot. It's the February.
It's going to be our hardware workshop.
Oh yeah. Do we have that all locked down with John?
John will be hosting that. He will be hosting that. He's confirmed it.
Yeah, he's willing to host it. It's a matter of the exact date I don't think has been set. Just trying to figure out how we can do this safely, I'll say, with the COVID. So, but we may, James was talking about possibly doing an online type of situation. So he is willing to do it whenever we want to.
All right, so we were shooting for about February 13th or so, but we'll get the information out on that. And our regular monthly class is February 20th, or not class. Our regular next meeting is February 23rd, and we're hoping to talk about spring prep, one-on-one or one-to-one feeding, and prepping for a nectar flow. All right. Until next time, that's a wrap. Thank you.